There are so many more beautiful and passionate people in our remembrance community. So I thought, let's keep this train going. Here's a highlight reel, if you will, of some of the beautiful words these special people had to say about remembrance. And if you want to see more, you can find the full 20-minute conversations with each person on our YouTube channel. Each video has a description with links to resources and info that help support these individual messages of remembrance. I hope you find the comfort and support as I have done while speaking with these extraordinary people. And I hope you all take good care until we see each other again.
Well, my name is Richard Raffin. I live in Ottawa. And for the last 12 years, I've been the calligrapher that maintains the Canadian Books of Remembrance for Veterans Affairs Canada. I like to think that I can enter the names and pay homage to the men and women who have given their lives in the service of our country. And I do it with honor and I do it with pride. For every one of those names, there's a family. There's brothers, sisters, moms, fathers. There's whole families. That to me is remembrance.
I spend my time as much as I possibly can visiting our boys and taking photos of their grave markers for anyone who wants to see them, and especially for those who can't get to their family's marker.
There's a terrible duality of war in the words of Matthew Halton, who was a Canadian war correspondent. And he said that, splendid things come out of war, but war is a thing to be ashamed of. And I just love that. I think it perfectly encapsulates what we need to do on Remembrance Day, what we need to do to understand and the emotions that we experience. I think we get very caught up on Remembrance Day talking about our freedom. It's not just our freedom. As evidenced by, the staff at the Juno Beach Center or the people you see lining the roads and doing vigils for Canadians in the Netherlands and elsewhere in Europe, right? It was about their freedom too.
I'm a veteran. I served for 30 years in uniform and proud paratrooper. I've been a sailor with the Navy. I've served with the Air Force, overseas peacekeeping operations, and now retired. And I've been serving on the board of Beechwood Cemetery. That's Canada's national cemetery and the home of the National Military Cemetery. I've been on the board now for just under 20 years. In the wars, the men went over and they fought as heroes. They came back and they were heroes. We've got heroes in our midst right now. When you consider the nurses and the medical staff, the first responders, the people who are literally fighting the enemy with every bit of equipment they have and every ounce of their strength, day in and day out, that's the stuff that heroes are made of.
There's an old man who lives one street away from me, and he usually comes out at the end of his drive with a trumpet or bugle, and he plays the last post. So I'm hoping that at 11 o'clock I'll be able to open the window and just hear him play.
As I said, looking at the Menin Gate empty, two buglers. Well, now today there's audience back again under the gate, and the buglers never stopped. They just continued. They were even ready to violate any policy. They said we're not stopping. It's tradition, and that's important to us. So we want to keep it going. There's lots planned for the 11th in Ypres as well. It's back to normal, with the one exception that you're not with us. That's the only slight difference. Well, not slight, huge difference. The ceremonies will all be there. Your representatives, your diplomats will be there. But the people we really care about, the real Canadian pilgrims, the British pilgrims, Aussies, Kiwis, that they sadly will only be there in very small numbers.
One of my personal, because I live beside a cemetery, I go in there and I try and see them as people like me. I actually have conversations in my head with people, and I will sort of say things. I'm going off for a beer net soon after this. I wish you guys could join me, because I try and think of them in a still existing context, as opposed to being solely a stone there, not representing a human being. And I'll find myself, as I go past a grave and I see there from a certain county, thinking to myself, I wonder which football team they supported. Because it makes them a person, not a name. And so is that remembrance? Is that, in a sense, is trying to, that's my way of humanizing that visit there.
And my great uncle, Abraham Dufresne, who was killed on Juno Beach. I think about him probably every day, especially now with what I'm doing. But it's something I think about, probably almost every day, just about what he did. It's it's quite emotional for me and quite personal. So that's that element. So again, like I said, I got all these thoughts swirling in my head with my background in academics and personally and what I do now. And it's just, there's a lot going on. Yeah.
I feel like we can all be, especially with your family history on top. Geez Louise. I feel like we're all snow globes and you're shaking really quick. And then on Remembrance Day, everyone you know is kind of in your headspace that you've been in all year, for this one day. Can you show it? Is there anything that you want to show us?
Yeah, I can show a lot, and I can show a lot, but I
know.
can turn my screen a little bit. I can turn my screen a little bit, and then you have my part of my
oh my God.
But this is how it was in 1945 in Groningen, and there are all original uniforms from the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division that liberated us here in Groningen. It's not a background, though. It's not a background. Okay, still can.
That's a rare thing, hey?
Yeah. Now, remembrance is, I think, to remember the sacrifices that have been made for our freedom in the Netherlands, and people from all over Canada, joined voluntarily to free us here. And I think we need to tell the story, because freedom is fragile. I was lucky to speak with a lot of veterans. And I can remember there was one veteran that asked me who's going to tell the stories when I'm gone. And I promised him, and I said to him, we are here to tell your story, and we're going to do it as much as possible.
And then they got hit by a barrage and they were all killed. And there's a row of them at Anzio Cemetery. And, if the timing had been different, if they couldn't get up because of, mortar stonks or Nebelwerfers or whatever, then there would be a Bombardier Reed buried in that row, and I wouldn't be sat here talking to you now. But it's quite a strange feeling to think that, of your own mortality in a wider sense, that you may never have existed because of the quirk of circumstance. Military history is my job, but as I always say to people, it's a lot more than that. It's part of who I am and part of what I've been for nearly 4 decades now. So, and it's an amazing legacy to be a part of, I think, really, because you know yourself the pleasure you get from being in those locations and unearthing the stories of guys, and coming to grips with what remembrance really is, and seeing people's reaction when they travel to see a family member's grave or name on a memorial. I mean, that is something, as you know, is really, really special.
And there is always something, and it's never failed in my research, never failed in the documentaries I've made, never failed when I'm doing a battlefield tour. Serendipity of some kind comes to raise its head, and it's amazing. There's always something that is completely unexpected that ends up almost becoming fundamental to who you are by the end of it. It touches you, it hits you. And then that links back to going for beer and a lovely dinner at the end of the night and really, truly feeling thankful. It's like every day is a Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it gives you an overwhelming sense of pride when you see that Canada flag hanging out, when you hear people singing our national anthem in another country. Especially Holland. And to watch all the kids put those flowers out on each individual grave is just, yeah. I'll coin a term that a very dear friend of mine uses a lot. Oh, my heart.
Oh, my heart.
Is I've been able to tell the families what happened, because 9 out of 10 of these families that I've talked to, and I think I'm at about 250 families I've connected with so far. Dad never talked about it. Dad, had these weird little things that he did. Why did he do that? What happened when he was a prisoner of war? And I'm able to either direct them to my dad's book, go to the library, you don't have to buy it, and read it, because it's very simple. It's not a military historian's perspective, it's a man's perspective. And so families are healing. Families are telling me they can forgive their father because, there was so much baggage, and now they can put it to rest because they know what their dad went through. And so this has become way more than a research project. This has become, we're like a community. I call us DEP kids, because we get it. We get each other without even having to discuss anything. We understand, because again, 9 out of 10 of these men came home badly broken.
Her grandfather fought and lost his life at Beaumont Hamel, and she waited her whole life to be on tour to come to this spot. And she was elderly at this point, and she said to me, "So my grandfather was never found. Can you tell me then, is he in this field that we're standing in right now?" And I says, "I can tell you that from somewhere between St. John's Road, where the jump off point was for them, to the danger tree, your grandfather is in this area of land right here. We'll never know." And, and somebody, when you see their facial expression, the release of their emotions, knowing now, okay, my grandfather's here in this grassy field full of shell holes, it's emotional. I actually found myself for the first time as a guide taking like a 60-second time out to just kind of, take a quick gut check and just kind of get my emotions back in order, because I thought I'm human there too. I'm there with them. No, I had nothing to do with the relative of the parade, but I'm sharing and I'm immersed in these stories with these people that they're willing to share with me. And they're hard to hear, a lot of these stories.
So there's a woman in Dieppe who has been placing flowers on his grave for probably at this point 30 years, every August 19th. And the reason why is on his headstone, his family asked somebody, basically there's a little poem, "His place of rest I may never see, so would some kind hand place a flower for me." And this woman saw that, and so every year she has been placing a flower on behalf of his family. And I was able to finally find his photo and send it to her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that's somebody else I think of quite often. The twins, the Montgomery twins. How do you lose a son? How do you lose brothers? How do you lose twins? And it doesn't destroy your life. The families that I contact, a granddaughter who very proudly sent me all this stuff about her grandfather, and an incredible photo of him with a radio set on, training before the Dieppe raid, and then told me that she never met him because when he got home, he took his life. And, how do you respond to that? I understand, I get it. But these families are still broken 80 years later. They're still dealing with it. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this.
I said to him, Norm, he says, "Did you serve?" He said, "Yes, I did." I said, I fought in Italy. I said, "Wow." I says, Norm was a quiet guy. I should say this. He was talking to me, but if you saw him outside on the sidewalk, you could tell he was carrying weight on his shoulders. You could tell. Norm said he heard the explosion and he went running down there. I never forget what he said to me. He said, "Glenn, you know that saying, only the good die young?" I said, "Yes, Norm, I've heard that saying." And he says, "Well, it's a hell of a lot different saying it than it is seeing it." And he said, "And I saw what happens to those men." And he said, "I rarely ever gave another order after that." And I felt so bad for him. I thought, man, this poor man who's now in his 80s at that time was living with us every day. I didn't have to ask him. I now knew that. This wasn't something that Norm forgot about for years on end. I'm sure Norm, when he got up in the morning, he thought about those men and all the rest.
thinking obviously of my dad, and wishing that things had gone differently, but just remembering all of our serving. Remembrance is reflection.
Any parting words, any last thoughts for you before we say our goodbyes?
Just keep remembering.